Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel, Colonati. Today it's time for another reading wrap-up. It's been a couple of weeks since I did this, since I was on vacation and then I was recovering from vacation as it goes. But yeah, I have 8 things to talk about now and I figured I should get on that, so let's begin. First up is Origin, A Genetic History of the Americas by Jennifer Raff. This is a nonfiction book about my new favorite topic, paleogenomics, though I've kind of encountered this idea before in other books on genetic research and using genetics to investigate history and the past and everything. But yeah, this book is very much about paleogenomics. Basically, Jennifer Raff is presenting a new kind of refined hypothesis for how the Americas were populated by the first peoples, what the timeline possibly was for that, all based on current knowledge of the genetics of the first peoples and archaeological evidence and other things as well. So basically it's, you know, paleo research combined with genetic sequencing, and I love this. I sought this book out because I was looking for a book on genetics that focused on the Americas as like its sole topic rather than just a footnote or a single chapter in a book, which is how I felt that a lot of books on genetics up until very recently have gone. Most of the books on the topic I've read have focused on, you know, the major figures in the field throughout history, and that's mostly the US and Europe. And I think also that like British and European populations, even some Asian populations, have been much more heavily researched with, you know, genetic sequencing and stuff than in the Americas. So that was the main topic, but I wanted something about here, you know? And that was exactly what I got with this book. I also really appreciated that Jennifer Raff is extremely clear about the ethics and the social issues ingrained in her research and even in, you know, the theory that she is proposing. Because sometimes, you know, what the scientific evidence tells us at any point about history may actually contradict what first peoples say about their own history, and you have to be conscious of that. But also she discusses the issues of racism and colonialism and really controversial and unethical behavior of, you know, researchers towards minority and protected populations in the past, and how that has deeply soured the relationship between, you know, Native American tribes and researchers like herself. And that is something that I think she thinks everybody in this field has to be very sensitive towards and very conscious of, and I appreciated that. There was no way that she could have written this book without addressing some of these topics, and I liked that she went head on into that and made it a pretty central point of her book as well. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. It was like a 5-star perfect reading experience for me. The only reason I knocked off like half a star from it is that I think it could have benefited greatly from more and better illustrations. There are some concepts and stuff that she's talking about that really needed to be illustrated better to grasp them, and the illustrations and the diagrams that are in the book I thought just weren't very sufficient. I didn't think they were very self-explanatory. I spent a lot of time looking at them going, do I understand what this actually means? But aside from that, I really enjoyed this. Unfortunately, I cannot say such glowing things about the next book, but let's be honest, I didn't have very high expectations for it in the first place, and that is Aurora by David Koepp. I did not pick this up for any particular reason other than the premise is interesting. What if the Carrington event happened in the modern day? Like, yeah, I've been super fascinated by that idea for a long time. If you don't know what the Carrington event is, go look it up on Wikipedia, but basically massive solar flare hits the Earth and fries all of our electronics, and we don't have electricity for possibly years, and it's a worldwide event. So I thought, well, this is gonna be a pretty explosive science fiction thriller. It was not. I mean, I'm mainly gonna fault this book for just not taking advantage of the sci-fi premise very well. Most of the focus of this book is on really sucky people continuing to suck in this sort of vague the power went out situation. All of the characters in this are just horrible people. I did not care about any of them, and I hoped that many of them would just die. That would solve a lot of the problems, like the crime in the book. That's not how you want people to feel about your characters. There also, like, two of the main characters are a brother and a sister, Tom and Aubrey, who have some sort of like mysterious past. Like, they do not get along, but they're tied together by something that happened when they were kids. It's presented like it's this really big deal, like something awful happened to them when they were kids that's glued them together. And then the big reveal happens in an imagined conversation. And it's stupid. It's like, guys, you could have just gone to therapy. So yeah, this book was not great. It wasn't terrible either. Like, it was a pretty fast read and it wasn't boring, so I'll give it that. But not my kind of science fiction, basically, is what I am saying. Next up are some comics and shorter things that I read. I finally got to Olympus Volume 2 by Rachel Smythe, or is it Smythe? I genuinely don't know how to pronounce this last name when it is spelled this way, so feel free to correct me. So Olympus is, I've described this as crack before. That's totally what it is. It is a modern retelling of Hades and Persephone, and the artwork is super interesting. Like, everything is color-coded in these vibrant colors, and it's really interesting. Like, it's predominantly a romance, I guess, but it seems like it's going in a direction to tackle some pretty serious issues like sexual assault. So I eat this up. I really prefer to read this in the physical format, by the way. I have tried it on Webtoon and I just don't really like the Webtoon format at all. But yeah, I will continue to read this as it comes out in print volumes, and it is a very entertaining time. Then there is Ordinary Gods, Volume 1. This is written by Kyle Higgins and Joe Clark, and the artist is Felipe Watanabe. I got this when I was on vacation in Chicago because it reminded me a lot of at least the early days of The Wicked and the Divine by Kieran Gillen. And so both of these basically have a similar concept of god-like people reincarnated in the general population, and they're being sought out for various reasons. What is their purpose, etc. This particular one is more like people with godlike abilities are imprisoned and they're trying to escape, but they're being killed and reincarnated. So yeah, unfortunately this just didn't hit quite right. I do think the general idea is interesting, and I did really enjoy the artwork. It's just very solid, and it's a style that I usually get along very well with. However, in just a single volume, it completely failed to make me feel invested in the characters. I felt like a lot of the story beats, a lot of the mythology was very predictable. I could just tell what was going to happen and what the problems were going to be and everything. So I lost interest in it about halfway through. I'm not going to continue with this, but it was worth checking out just in case it was my kind of thing, because it was almost my kind of thing. Then there is this cute little book. It is Elemental Haiku, Poems to Honor the Periodic Table, 3 Lines at a Time by Mary Soon Lee. So some years ago, Mary Soon Lee wrote a whole series of haiku, one for every element of the periodic table, and it was published in Science. And this is the book form, which also has some little illustrations in it, and it's really neat. They are not completely traditional haiku, by the way. They take the format, but not like references to the seasons, for example. And there are also these little notes added, kind of explaining what the haiku is referencing and some properties of these elements. This was just a fun read. If you want some geeky poetry, then I would definitely recommend this. I really enjoyed it. I thought I would just give this away once I was done with it, but I think I might actually revisit it at some point, so I will keep it in my collection, and yeah, it was nice. Next is A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers. This is the follow-up to A Psalm for the Wild Built. As far as I know, the Monk and Robot series is just a duology right now, though I really, really hope that that changes at some point in the future, or maybe we'll get different characters, different stories in this world. I adored A Psalm for the Wild Built, though I will also say that I think that when I read the first story, it was addressing some things that were kind of happening in my life at the time. So I read it and was like, this book is speaking to me. And I don't often have that experience. So A Psalm for the Wild Built will always have a special place in my heart because of that. It was just like pretty much from page one going to be one of my favorite reads like ever. And it's pretty hard for any sort of sequel to live up to that. So I also really enjoyed A Prayer for the Crown Shy. I think it is a really good conclusion, mainly for Dex's story, their personal journey. So that's what I really liked about that, is it caps off their journey. It also has other things to say, but I didn't just utterly adore it from page one like I did the first story. But yeah, that's just a personal circumstances thing. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. It's just the continuing adventure of Dex and Mosscap, as Dex is kind of taking Mosscap into human civilization, where Mosscap can ask its question, what do humans need? Though it is also asked, what do robots need? What does Mosscap need? And so yeah, I think this installment explores that question more. What do people need? Well, and what can they give each other, I guess? So yes, very, very much enjoyed. And like I said, I hope that there's more to come in this world at some point. And to cap off this wrap up, I seem to be in the middle of a male queer fantasy romance binge, which I cannot really explain. I think it's mainly a coincidence that a bunch of these books have just suddenly hit my want to read list, but there you go. So first up is Pool of Dreams. This is by Sam Burns and W.M. Fawkes. This is a thing that the Amazon Kindle store recommended to me. I read the sample, I was obsessed, I bought the ebook, and then I was mildly disappointed after the 40% mark. So basically, what if a newly minted king met the Lady of the Lake, except the Lady of the Lake is a super hot male fairy? I expected this to be a little bit more dark and badass and sexy based on this cover, and it really wasn't. I think what made me lose steam with it at about the middle of the book is that Siren, the male fairy character, is initially presented as kind of mysterious and sexy and a little bit powerful, especially in his seduction, but he quickly realized that he's actually kind of not whiny, but he comes across as a little bit shallow. He's mainly like, I want to dress in silks, and then pouts in the corner for a while. It was not the dynamic that I was expecting based on like this cover. And then it just got very repetitive. The angsty bits are a little bit mild, but the same things keep being repeated. And it's like, this could be 100 pages shorter, get to the point, and just be a little bit darker, I guess, and it would have worked for me a bit better. So I tried it, but it didn't quite live up to the sample I read. And lastly, we come to A Taste of Gold and Iron by Alexandra Rowland. This book was not on my radar for a very long time. I think that I learned about it from Rhea, actually, and when they bought a copy of it at Worldcon, I thought, I really want to try reading that. Does my library have it? My library does not have it, but I got it from somebody else's library, so thank you. I was pretty obsessed with reading this book. It's like all I wanted to do for days on end was just to read this book. It is a queer fantasy bodyguard romance, and I expected it to just be this like slow burn romance between a prince and one of his special bodyguards, and that it would be in this like Ottoman Empire inspired world. I got exactly that. I loved this. It also has some pretty interesting plot details, like this whole thing about somebody's counterfeiting coins and debasing the empire's currency, which is very, very bad. So they're trying to catch the counterfeiters. That was really interesting to me, actually. I like when stories like this really do get into the nuts and bolts of politics and empire and economics. Like, you can make this very interesting. I also think it has a very good and interesting depiction of anxiety. The main character, Koepp, has anxiety, and this is a world where like the concept of like an anxiety disorder is not really known. So he refers to himself as a coward, and nobody really knows what's going on with him. They don't know how to help him when he's having like panic attacks. And that is dealt with a lot in this story, and I thought that was very, very interesting. I don't typically become anxious when I read about other people experiencing anxiety, but there are some descriptions in this book that are like so realistic in some ways of like having a panic attack that I was like, wow, I know what that feels like. Ooh, this is a very good description. And yeah, so I really liked that. And it just like all the pieces of this came together quite nicely for me, so super enjoyed it. I think that some parts of this may not be for everyone, especially that it is quite slow in places, but it never really lost steam for me because there was always something else happening. If there wasn't a lot of movement on like the relationship side, there was something happening with the politics or with the counterfeit scheme and stuff like that. So yeah, super, super enjoyed this one, and I would recommend it if you want some fantasy romance. It's a good thing that that is the end because I think I'm losing some of my coherency. I need another cup of tea this morning. Thank you guys so much for watching. Do let me know if you have read any of these books, or if you want to, leave me a comment down below. And I will talk to you again very soon about more things, and until then, bye.